I recently got 100 institutional downloads for my Mac app compressor in the Mac App Store. And the worst thing was that then the customer couldn't actually buy my app because it was using in-app purchases. And currently, the Apple Business Manager, which institutions use, cannot use in-app purchases. So I have an app in the Mac App Store, and I thought I'm going to make a lot of money. And then a company tries to actually buy a lot of licenses, and it turns out it's not possible because Apple doesn't support it in the Mac App Store. Apple actually doesn't support in-app purchases for institutions and in the Apple Business Manager, which means that all apps that support or use in-app purchases cannot be purchased by the Apple Business Manager. And that is super bad because that is a lot of revenue that will just not come to you, even though your app is in the App Store. You might be thinking, you're paying 30% or 15% if you're in the Apple Small Business Program for every sale on the App Store to Apple is a fair trade because Apple gives you distribution, it gives you publicity, and it signals trusts, and it handles the payments and is your merchant of record. And I think that is true for iOS, but on the Mac, the landscape looks very differently. The sad truth is nobody discovers your app on the Mac App Store if you're not featured. And getting featured is not easy. It is not a trivial thing to do. Nobody goes to the App Store to discover apps for the Mac or find the next app they're going to purchase. That's just not a thing. And once you're realizing that the 30% or the price of doing business on the Mac App Store just become a very plain tax. Once you want to distribute your app in the Apple App Store, you have to use the Sandbox entitlement for your app, which already limits what your app can do in major ways. Here's an example of a really great Mac app that is in the App Store and outside of the App Store. And the App Store version, as I said, uses the Sandboxing entitlement because it needs to. And because of that, the App Store version of Juicy has less features than the direct download version because in the direct download version, there are no restrictions. The developer can just do whatever they want and ship a great app. While on the Mac App Store, they have to artificially limit what it can do just because it needs the sandboxing entitlement. The sandbox entitlement is not enough. Of course, you also have to conform to all of the app review guidelines, which are listed here. You can just quickly scroll through them. And yeah, you have to comply to every single one of them. Otherwise, you're in danger to get rejected or your update gets rejected, which, by the way, can now take multiple days to get a new update through the Mac App Store review, which means every time you want to ship an update, you have to ask Apple for approval, which can take some time. And if it's a critical bug fix, this will also take this bug fix away from your users because they cannot download it. They all have to wait for Apple's approval to download the new version of your app. So let's say you have a critical bug fix that you need to ship. Then you need to first write release notes, update everything, then submit the app for App Store review, and then 3 days later, if you're lucky, your new update is approved and in the App Store and your bug fix is live. If you just would publish your app outside of the Mac App Store, you wouldn't have to wait a bit. You can just submit the update and it's done. You don't like Apple's pricing system, you don't like to use the one-off purchase before you can download the app, you don't like how subscriptions or in-app purchases are structured inside the App Store, you have no chance of changing that. If you distribute your app outside of the Mac App Store, you can choose. You can do volume licenses, you can charge for updates of your app, you can do whatever you want. You have full freedom. So this is another limitation that you just have to deal with when you ship your app inside of the Mac App Store. And let's not forget about this. For this service, you need to pay 30% or 15% if you're in a small business program. So every time somebody wants to purchase your app, you pay 30% just to Apple, just to have this experience of having to go through app review, getting delayed, having to have the sandbox entitlement, and having to conform to all of Apple's App Store guidelines. But, and I need to be honest here, obviously the Mac App Store also comes with some advantages. Apple plays merchant of record, so it means all of the sales go directly through Apple. You don't have to handle taxes, refunds, credit card issues, other payment issues your customers might run into yourself. It's all handled by Apple, and at the beginning of every month, they will just send you the money that you're making, minus, of course, their cut. And that is a real benefit to trying to do that outside of the Mac App Store. And of course, a lot of users trust the Mac App Store because it is built into the OS. It is controlled by Apple, and usually users trust Apple to make a good job with the app review. And of course, it exists for a reason. So how does distributing outside of the Mac App Store actually look like? You have to take care of a bunch of things. You have to use your own merchant of record, or you have to handle taxes and everything yourself. You have to do app notarization. You have to do app code signing. You have to have an idea of how you're going to handle updates, so users don't have to always go to your website and download the latest version from your website. So you need to use some automatic update mechanism. Another thing you need to handle yourself is the licensing part. If you purchase something on the Mac App Store, it's easy because Apple takes care of that, and you have frameworks to check if a user paid and stuff. When you do that outside of the App Store, you need to handle that. You need to have a stable licensing system that users can use, so they can purchase licenses and then activate their app after they made a purchase. And because I myself had this problem of wanting to ship Mac apps outside of the Mac App Store, I built Amore, which takes care of all of these pain points. It takes care of notarization, app packaging, automatic over-the-air updates, and also the licensing and merchant of record part. I think it can make sense to have your app listed in the Mac App Store. If you can use the sandboxing entitlement, then you won't have any issues. Or if you just have a free utility app that you want to publish, then the App Store can also be good. But as I said, it takes way more effort and time to get it through App Store review. So that is something that you have to decide. If you have a more complex app that cannot have the sandbox entitlement, or uses system extensions that can also not be in the App Store, or you have some specific pricing structure that you need, then it definitely makes sense to ship your app outside of the App Store. And important to keep in mind, you can have your app in both the App Store and outside the App Store. Juicy, the app that I was showing before as an example, does that. It has one version in the App Store, it has one version directly distributed from its website, and it has another version distributed via said app. That is always an option. You always have that freedom too.